Welcome to the FatBoy Show, Mr. Egesa. Good to finally speak to you face to face. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for hosting me.
Yeah, you are a very interesting figure. You are a software engineer. You are a CEO with an honorary professorship in business counseling. You serve as an international political and business strategist focused on Ugandan affairs.
No,
and,
focusing on African
you also do,
affairs. African affairs.
African affairs, not just Ugandan.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I do follow you on social media and have for some time. And I noticed that a lot of times you do post about corruption. You do criticize systemic corruption. And obviously, we are in election season and you've had a lot to say about that. So, yeah, it's an honor to have you join me today. Thank you.
A pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to you. I've been a big fan of yours.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
Have you now? You tell me this now.
I'm telling you.
Mean.
Yeah, I mean, from the days of your stint in FM radio, I've been following you. I also have a young brother who is a very big fan of you. He's the one who first told me about RX Radio when you had left FM and moved into Audio Vision. So he told me about, and I checked it out. I listen to it, especially I only listen to radio when I'm on the road. So I always tune in the FatBoy Show if I'm moving in the morning hours. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Happy to hear that. What do you make of the evolution that's happening in media consumption in the country today, where much of the content being consumed in media is online now?
I really put my hat off for you guys who have stuck your heads out to be trailblazers in this new terrain. Things are not very clear for people with history in broadcasting, traditional broadcasting as it were, but I think that you're adjusting. I think a lot more ground needs to be covered on your presentation on social media, so you can ably compete with the low budget guys, the influencers. Huh? Yeah.
For those of us who are coming from traditional media, the challenge is that essentially we're competing in the Wild West, you could say. The old system was a lot more regulated. And so there were parameters within which all of the players had to operate. So there were rules about what you could say or could not say. And so we tended to have to be very careful. And if we wanted to be provocative, we needed to always know where the lines were. Compared to today, where with social media, there are no lines, right? So traditional media is still operating under the same constraints. They can't say very outlandish things, especially like if you want to accuse somebody of something.
When they host me on some of these stations, they always tell me, as you submit, please make sure we don't get off air. Make sure our license doesn't get revoked and stuff like that.
I mean, it's crazy because, and I saw that you were on CBS, right? You recently, was it on CBS where you had an interview? Yeah.
No. On, I think Akabozi, something like that.
Okay.
Yes, radio.
Well, so you're going to have a social media guy, say Elumbuye, right? You'll just go and say, so-and-so has stolen this, has killed so-and-so, is murdering, is kidnapping. Like you can just say stuff like that, just fly off on a handle and say a lot of these provocative things, putting aside for a moment whether or not those things are true, but very sort of direct accusations, which on traditional media you really can't do, right? Because we would be inviting lawsuits to the business and to our employers. And so there we are in the Wild West as traditional media, wherein the influencers that are capturing a lot of the ears and the eyeballs
maybe
can do whatever they want.
If I could just chip in there, yeah. Traditional media was created to remain captive to the capitalist class. Yeah, the capitalists always wanted to control the narrative, and so you see the whole architecture of statecraft and its interaction with the so-called fourth estate is designed to make sure capitalists always have an upper hand. Now, today, the capitalists in the West have moved. If you look at the social media platforms in the United States, they are owned by the biggest capitalists in the United States. They're the men that are controlling modern America. So they have moved the needle. And of course, our capitalist class here, together with the political class, need to read the signs of the times and also move. So it's no longer business as usual. And the other model is not fit for purpose in this era. Yeah.
Well, you've seen, given the trends we have seen currently, even globally, we are seeing newsrooms shrinking. We're seeing major broadcasters letting go of some of the bigger talents who were previously paid tens of millions of dollars per year. That model seems to no longer be sustainable. I saw Don Wanyama of New Vision, Vision Group, lamenting that because the company has suffered a string of losses over the last several years. And part of what he's attributed that is the shift to digital, both for consumption of media by the public and also regarding where advertisers are directing their resources.
Personally, I will sit out the New Vision discussions because I have previously done consultancy for them, and where we fell out was on a failure to reach common ground on facing the realities of the modern markets. Yeah. So I don't really want to delve into the details. Because there are confidentiality clauses in our engagement.
Okay.
But
I understand.
But it is far from what he's saying. It's not really about that. It is more to do with, the political influence that the company continues to have to deal with. I think that's a big part. And I don't think New Vision is short of ideas. I mean, we had lengthy conversations on that. They have the ideas. They have very innovative young people, not just young people, but they have a very innovative workforce who come up with all sorts of ideas. But then there are certain things that, there are breaks that will be applied to certain, innovations, telling them that, we cannot go this way because our identity is this. And then our biggest stakeholder is not going to be happy with this and that, this kind of thing. So it's a tightrope that they have to walk. So,
So I guess, I know you can't speak in too much detail on this, but you believe that without those sorts of constraints, then the company would be able to do interesting things which could make it more competitive in the market.
Yeah, they would evolve. They would evolve and, innovate. You have seen in Kenya, for example, Royal Media. Royal Media, for your information, I think you must be knowing that Royal Media is the most watched television in Africa amongst the traditional TV stations. Citizen TV of Royal Media is the most watched television.
Oh, okay. Citizen TV. I know Citizen TV.
Yeah. Citizen TV has the biggest. There is no TV station of the traditional TV stations in South Africa, in Nigeria, or any other part of Africa that has the numbers that Citizen Television commands. Yeah. Why? Because the owner of Royal Media Services allowed the team to have the latitude and the freedom to innovate and try to shape their editorial policies, their products to be fit for purpose in the present day and age. So it's, I think it's more to do with allowing innovation to thrive amidst all other constraints. So for him, he said, to hell with government contracts. And he enjoyed, of course, a very good working relationship with the late former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, which meant that if he ran into problems with the state, Raila Odinga would always hold his hand and then get back whatever would have been held back. Yeah, so it's, but he allowed them to innovate and they were able to maintain the numbers. You can go on Citizen TV when they're doing a live news broadcast, let's say at 9 o'clock, you will find there 20,000, 50,000 people watching news live, yeah, on a daily. Yeah, and
amazing. That is quite amazing. Okay, so back to you now. Maybe you can start by telling us what your political positions are. So I see you inserting yourself in a lot of these conversations. I've been involved in some of those tangentially, but I've noticed that.
I like the word you say, insert.
You know, here and there, I just see you popping up and you seem to have a lot to say. And then one day I'll see you saying something critical about the government. Then the other day, I'll see you saying something critical about the opposition. I'll see people calling you a regime apologist. Then I'll call others calling you a drunkard. Like, it seems like you're
a person who has
flack
never
from
even
all
tested
sides.
alcohol. Can you imagine that I've never tested alcohol? Huh? But you find some chap on social media calling me a drunkard. Yeah.
So maybe tell us about that. And I know there's some people who believe it's wrong to have to pigeonhole somebody, but it's also helpful to know where someone is coming from. What would you say you have a clear political position or inclination or a party?
No, I am
that
just
you might...
an objective. No, I'm just an objective person whose positioning is that of a strategist or a free thinker. I cannot allow my mind to be encumbered by extremist positions. Yeah. If I am going, so let's say, FatBoy, today you consider running for political office, and you come to me. So supposing I am inclined towards, let's say, the NRM ideology, and then you tell me you want to run on UPC, don't you think that my strategies that I craft for you would be encumbered or biased? Yeah, in a way. Yeah. So I cannot afford to take my hat to some of these political party positions. I cannot be an extremist. So as such, to thrive as a strategist, I have to be a centrist by excellence. Yeah, that is the safest and of course the most reasonable position to take. So I am not a fan of my clients. That's number one. So if someone is my client, I'm not their fan. I am just like a physician. A physician says, hey, I'm going to subject you to this test. Once I am done with the diagnosis, then of course we will start the treatment and then the prognosis and all that. So I am not somebody who is going to allow myself to be boxed into extreme positions. I also don't believe in exclusionist politics.
No, I was just going to say that surely, given the current political paradigm, some may argue that to not have a stance, to not be able to stand for a side, might show moral cowardice on your part. I get that accusation a lot because I also present myself.
Yeah, I have seen people accusing you of the same. I've seen people accusing you of the same, but that is pedestrian reasoning. If you ask me, FatBoy, if these two guys have a contestation, who is going to bring them to the table and not be accused of biasness? We need to have some cool heads. We need sober heads who can say, hey, you come from the right, the other guy comes from the left. Let's sit on the table. I am not inclined to any of you. What I'm interested in is to listen to both sides, and then we chat out a way forward. I mean, I don't think that everybody should be boxed into taking a binary position. So for me, I am somebody who abhors this binarization of politics and political conversations, to say the least.
Okay, I would say though that the purity testing is mostly coming from the opposition side. Pro-government people are not going to bother you too much. Like, yeah, if you say something negative about the regime, they might insult you here and there. But with the opposition guys, there's a different level of emotion coming from that side of things, and perhaps understandably so. They feel that their heroes and their representatives are being targets of harassment, kidnapping, arrests, which is all very true. And so they're coming at the conversation with a lot more emotion. The stakes seem higher for them than for the rest who may not particularly be on their side. Could that explain why they tend to be quite aggressive when expressing disappointment with those who do not align with their views?
I do understand where they're coming from. I sympathize with them. Because of the longevity of the current government and president, there is a lot of fatigue and lots of unresolved contradictions that pain people. So the decisions that people that are anti-government take are mostly decisions that are based on sentiment, a sentiment which is basically an anti-Museveni sentiment. So they don't want to listen to anything else. They have thrown all reason to the wind, and they're simply saying, you're either with us or you are with the oppressor. So they have not allowed themselves to face reality that there are people who will still say, despite all this, we need, all of us belong to Uganda, all of us have a stake in this country. You cannot enjoy the country, or you cannot enjoy your rights and freedoms to the exclusion of the other side. So each party thinks that they can only be right if they exclude the other group. Now, some of us who are centrists try to call these guys to a higher moral ground and say, look, guys, we can actually all exist in Uganda. So it doesn't have to be either you or the other. So this binarization kind of thing is something that I'm opposed to. I only agree with binarization in as far as computing is concerned. But when it comes to social life, I don't agree.
But how successful have you been? Because I'm honestly at the point where I feel like they can't be reached, where to simply make them understand that, hey, just because I'm not on board with your agenda 100% or your team 100%, it doesn't mean that I hate my country. It doesn't mean that I want people to be abducted or murdered. It doesn't mean I want hospitals to not have medicine. They seem to struggle to characterize you as anything other than complicit in the dysfunction the country is facing, and they seem to want to hold us morally culpable. I have received messages of people saying things like, we're going to deal with you. You keep talking that trash, we're going to come for you. I mean, what is this, 1994 Rwanda? What are we, cockroaches? I mean, this is crazy.
And the very last example of 1994 Rwanda that you have highlighted, I think, gives us a very good sneak peek into what is likely to happen if the third force of centrists doesn't actually grow in number. We have to build a critical mass of centrists, people who are objective and can call out these two extreme sides that are intolerant. So that's why I said they're just a mirror reflection of each other. Yeah. So you're asking me how successful have I been? I mean, it's just a small portion of our population that is sitting in this space, and I think we are now recruiting. The number is growing. You are there. I am here.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Thing is,
so if we occupy these spaces,
here's the thing. I wanted to say that I think there's two aspects to this. I think primarily a lot of people who you would consider to be centrist or like in the middle or independent, I think a lot of them just don't want the drama that will come with expressing a neutral position, because maybe you and I have a thin skin. You know, we can take it. We can take the blows. And at least in my case, I have a very public facing job description. So I'm forced to be in this situation. But for others who don't want to be caught up in the online drama, they'll just keep quiet, keep their thoughts to themselves, rather than to sort of get embroiled in any kind of drama or potentially be targets of hatred and harassment, which then unfortunately creates the impression in the minds of the extremists that their view is the only view. See, when they go on social media and they see the only people they see are overt regime apologists, of which there are a number on social media, and then I
don't agree with your take that we represent that the centrists are normally thin-skinned and maybe not just like in drama. That's a different group altogether. That's now a group that prefers, staying out of the political space. They don't actually want to have an opinion. Now, we are a different group because you speak out, I speak out. I don't fear to offend the opposition guys with my views. I don't fear to offend the government guys with my views. So does that mean that I have a thin skin? I don't think so. In fact, I have a thicker skin because I can take heat from both sides. Yeah, so because one side accuses you.
You might have a thick skin. You have a thick skin. I have a thick skin. I'm saying the average person wants to just stay out of it. Like, they don't need this. I'm going through a lot. I'm sending kids to school, paying bills. I don't need to have a mob of guys. And they tend to swarm in a mob, right?
Those are political, if you ask me, those are political illiterates. Yeah, those are just political illiterates, and I wouldn't want to be classed in the same category with them. Yeah, they are political illiterates because these are guys who don't understand that politics determines the price of, petrol or gas that runs their vehicles. Politics determines the price of salt and sugar. Bad politics will actually lead them to run to exile. Bad politics will lead to premature deaths and all these kind of things. So I wouldn't want to purport to be an ambassador of political illiterates. No. That's why I said I don't have that classification. Yeah.
Okay, now
I
wanted to ask.
Yeah.
I want to ask you what you think about me, because I don't think I've really expressed my full political thinking, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you make of it. So here's my thing, okay?
I just like you as a troll who gets under the skin of either side.
I mean, I guess I can be trollish, but that's not the full story. So I want to explain the full story to you. So I want you to listen, okay? Will you listen?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
You see, at the end of the day, it takes a high degree of tolerance to take some of the positions that you take, trolling or not. You must be very tolerant and willing to engage. Because I've seen your engagements with commercial activists, so to speak. There are circles that call others outright merchants and all those kind of things. I have seen how you engage with them, and I mean, I have to give it to you that you have a high degree of tolerance. So I think that you are more towards our centrist position more than hiding any extreme positions that you could be having underneath there. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to explain it to you. Give me a few minutes. So here we go. Me, I'm one of those people who actually doesn't believe democracy works in Africa. I actually think it's mostly performative. We're going through the motions. Democracy is not something that works in such a socially fragmented, multi-ethnic, non-homogeneous, pre-industrial society. I think we are just attempting to follow the model. We're attempting to follow the model of more ethnically and socially homogeneous Western nations who, upon giving us our independence, kind of just left us the reins. We'd never governed a country before. And we were forced to govern countries that were really artificial. Like in most cases, countries are created out of a cluster of people with similar beliefs, values, social customs, and so forth, right? And if you look around
countries
the world,
are created out of nations. Maybe just to what you're saying.
Okay, basically, to differentiate between nation and country. See, for example, Uganda is a nation, all right?
Yes.
Uganda is a nation. Ankole is a nation. And Busoga is a nation. And Bunyoro was a nation. Okay, and then in the north, you mostly had tribes, but not organized in as big a way as their contemporaries further south. So they lump us all together and say, okay, now you're a country, govern. How is that supposed to work? It's not supposed to work, and most African countries were constituted this way, forced to coexist in artificial
through
borders.
Violence. They were actually forced to coexist through violence. Through
violence, yes. Yeah, and then once we were handed the reins and then told, okay, now people should vote, I mean, it is really no surprise that we sort of defaulted back to old ways of thinking about allegiances, which is primarily ethnic, tribal, and then in some cases religious. So those divisions have defined African politics. And the only way you can keep a country together where you have such disparate people from such disparate backgrounds, the only way you can maintain peace is through military force. So we sit here and wonder why Africa gets dictators, but that's really the genesis of the problem that people don't want to acknowledge, is that our countries are artificial and it can only be made to exist through force. We look at a place like Iraq, we look at Libya, wherever we have seen military strongmen and we say, oh, he's evil, we don't stop to think, how is it that guys like that are able to ascend into prominence? It is because where people may attempt to engage in democratic processes, they then deal with the dysfunction and the chaos that follows. Eventually, someone steps up and says, okay, I'm going to maintain order. And yes, they will maintain order, but that usually means, and perhaps unfortunately, it will mean the curtailing of certain rights. So in a way, you kind of make a bit of a trade-off, don't you, where, you either choose stability under a military strongman like a Kagame or a Saddam or a Gaddafi, or you choose a sort of a more flexible political organization and sort of just hope that things don't collapse. But eventually they do tend to collapse. You see people splitting into ethnic factions, backing political parties that align with tribal factions, secessionist movements, rebel insurgencies. We're seeing this all across, Western Africa, the Sahel region, and we've seen that here in Uganda. So for me, democracy is a waste of time. We're just sort of doing pretend. So that is why I don't have as much of an investment in the process as most people do. What do you think about that? All right, so to pick up where we left off earlier, my point essentially is that I feel that democracy is not something that really applies to a society like this one, and that we are essentially just going through the motions. And so it's always going to be fraught with the shenanigans that we end up complaining about, every day. And so as someone who sort of just looked at the history of the world, how democracy have sprung up in ethnically homogenous, not 100%, but where you have societies that are at least a lot more culturally, the people are a lot more culturally aligned, spiritually aligned, politically aligned. You find that, and then they are also post-industrial, something like a democracy can take root because the institutions were already set up by whatever monarchical system that they had before democracy, formal democracy was instituted. For us in Africa, we sort of skipped all that. We went from being tribal to being colonized to then being told, okay, guys, you're now a nation. Here are the reins, figure it out. And it's been chaos ever since. So I find myself struggling to be invested in the democratic process. And I find myself not getting too emotional about some of the foibles of democracy in the developing world, because it is what I kind of expect. And I take the view that regardless of who you elect, regardless of which political party, you're essentially going to get more of the same. And if I'm being honest, most of us countries of the third world are essentially just client states of the developed West. We are essentially client states of our former colonial masters. And in many ways, they are the ones that sustain us by granting us preferential access to markets through programs such as AGOA, by granting us aid, paying for most of our infrastructure development, our education, our health sector. For all intents and purposes, we're really not sovereign nations. And that's why I just struggle to connect emotionally with this whole idea of, we are a nation, we are a country, we have to have certain democratic processes. I feel like we're just children playing around and running around. And so you're not going to see me lose sleep about who's the president. I'm ambivalent towards it. It could as well be a President Kyagulanyi or a President Besigye or a President Museveni. It's still going to be the same. And perhaps what's tragic is, for the most part, if we're going to hope for any semblance of order, it's probably going to require the kind of leader that doesn't necessarily fit within the mold of a democratic framework. We praise the Asian tigers, these countries, the Malaysians, the Singapores, while refusing to acknowledge that the only way they became as powerful as they did, whereas we were economically similar, some 60 years ago, is because you had a strong man take charge. Democracy did not turn Singapore and Malaysia into economic powerhouses. Now they may have a semblance of democracy because the hard work has already been done. The institutions were already built. I feel like we're just jumping across all of the important milestones and trying to end up at the finish line where we like to think of ourselves as a democracy. I just think it doesn't work. So I'm not invested too much in the political bickering about who's in parliament, who's in office, who's in what. I feel like what we have is really what we can expect. And where they do good things, I find myself pleasantly surprised, and I'm happy to just sort of go in that direction and hope that, we can all work together, build our societies, take care of our children. I just don't think that focusing too much on the political process is particularly helpful. I think actually it's a distraction.
Actually, in the words of Mwanga Chivumbi, elections in this part of the world are subversive, to say the least. You see, the position that you have just shared is a position that I hold, but usually it's dependent on the audience. If my audience cannot synthesize that kind of, message, I don't, expend my energy on it. If you have watched some of my takes when I'm talking, let's say, to Russian television, this is a global audience where my ideological orientation matters. I always classify what we have in our countries as propped up democracies. Sometimes I call them countries that are exercising democracy on stilts. The democracy that is, just being propped up artificially by Western global interests. So, but our local audience here, this is not the kind of conversation that they are willing to have, because they are emotionally invested in the shenanigans of the quasi-democratic facades that I've been talking about here. So I have been reminding them time without number that what you have here is a military government that is, trying to put up a semblance or a quasi-democracy, giving you that kind of feel that you can actually determine some of the leaders that will eventually control your resources through democratic means or through elections, whereas it's not the case on the seat that matters the most. So I have had to create that clear divide and know the audience that I'm dealing with and what kind of message that they can consume and feed it to them. So when I'm dealing with the local, I tend to go deeper into what the shenanigans. I play the game. When I'm dealing with bigger audiences, I tend to hold that position, which is a position that I look at as more of a Pan-Africanist position, that we need to redefine what democracy means in an African setting. We need to examine the history of our countries. How did they come to be what they are? These were countries, like you've said, forged through violence by mercenaries like Lugat. And then so you bring different nations, force them into becoming a country, and then they have no national ethos, they do not have a set of shared values, and then you want them to skip the different stages that they're supposed to go through in terms of governance and being self-aware as a people before they can have a democratic setup. So it is on one hand, it's something created out of neo-colonial, a part of a neo-colonial agenda. But on the other hand, it is also a sign of weakness and, in your own words, low IQ prevalence in our societies. Yeah. Yeah. We are not people. My assessment of African people is that we are a people that do not like holding conversations that call us to strategic thinking. We are people that are so comfortable dealing with operational issues, at best tactical issues, but we do not want to engage at a strategic level. So when you call an African to a conversation at a strategic level, where you're talking about long-term, big picture, it's a conversation that they find boring. So that's why I told you that when we're dealing with our local guys here, I don't usually expend my energy on that. You will see, at one point I was engaging some of these politicians on a talk show, and I told them that the NUP is accessorizing the quasi-democratic facade propagated by the NRM and the President Museveni hegemony. And then they asked me, so what do you want us to do? You want us to be analysts like you? You get my point, yeah? So they do not have, the willingness to have these kind of conversations because politics to them is a job. So you have job seekers on either side. Yeah, they are simply going into politics for survival. They're not going into politics to shape the destiny of a society. You get my point? Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I understand.
So now you have to know that I am dealing with people. These are children, so to speak, who are not yet prepared to take hard food, solid food. So we have to feed them semi-solid food. That's why I simply tell them, look, both sides, you have issues. I will point them out. But by and large, every now and then, I will slide in the message that this is a military government. At the end of the day, the military in Uganda is the ultimate arbiter of political power. Everything else is just noise. Yeah.
So let's assume that the president's opponents, the incumbent opponents, are successful and they are able to take power. Do you honestly see things fundamentally changing? Let us not forget that the person who's in power today also came singing all kinds of songs about how things were going to be different. In fact, if the Museveni of 1986 came to Uganda today and he could see how Uganda was running, he might he might be similarly inclined to take the drastic measures he took then, because whatever you may think of what was wrong with Uganda in 1980, it's nowhere near as what is wrong with Uganda today.
Okay.
In terms of the scale of the corruption.
Yes, yes. Let me say two things. One, I think in 1986 he was talking as a political novice. He did not actually have experience and a proper appreciation of the Ugandan society as it were, and as he has now found out, given the time he has spent in power. Number two, even in Africa, where you've seen experiments of successful benevolent dictatorships, for example, in Rwanda, you will see that there is that element that you highlighted with the Western countries that have been successful democracies, because, there is that kind of homogeneity. If you look at Rwanda, the population is more homogeneous than a country like Uganda. Yeah. You do not go and find, 50 tribes in Rwanda. Yeah, it's not there. So they are closer to a homogeneous society than here. So the reality of Uganda's politics is a little bit different. That if you want to come and practice what we have been calling benevolent dictatorship, that is going to help establish order in a society, the pushback is not something that you will have prepared sufficiently for. And usually, given the fragility of the state in this part of the world, you will normally be run out of office. Yeah, so it's not as simple as we look at it. Yeah, actually. Yeah.
No, I was just thinking that. I think people do not appreciate the scale of corruption that would be needed to maintain any semblance of stability in any other regime outside of this one, because the current regime rules using two methods. First, brute force militarism, and also corruption to a very large extent.
Actually,
and
for me,
I feel like he's just a minute. I feel like he's succeeded in a way, not perfectly, but in creating a balance of it where, yes, there is brute military force or to sort of curtail the more violent side of things, and for the more sort of politically oriented form of dissent, there's been a reliance on corruption and nepotism to, give people the jobs and to invite even opposition politicians to enjoy in the spoils. You'd be surprised. I think a lot of opposition politicians are quite happy with this government because I think they're reaping a lot. So imagine a future in which you do not have a Museveni.
No, Museveni is the poster child of a person that is governing by following the script in the Dictators handbook. I don't know if you've read that book by Dimeskita. Yeah.
No.
Bruce Dimeskita and Alistair. They wrote the Dictators handbook, and they concluded that why bad behavior is almost always good politics. Yeah. So it's they classified the society. They created actually strata where you have essentials, then you have expendables, so the interchangeables. So now these guys here in Uganda today, right now, President Museveni has mastered that art. So he knows which particular layer of society is interchangeable, which particular layer is expendable, and he knows how to use money. For me, I have been saying that President Museveni, his legacy in power can be summed up in two things. One is militarism, and then two is money, commercialization of politics. Yeah, so those are two things that will perfectly represent his legacy in Uganda's politics. And I think that is exactly the point that you're bringing forward. Yeah?
Yeah, that is precisely my point, because let's say you have a president, Kyagulanyi, he comes into office, okay? And because he's been speaking out so much about police, abuses, abductions, that sort of thing, for the first few years, he's probably, if he were to become president, he would probably not go heavy-handed in terms of that sort of use of brute force and the power of the states. Now, the question is, by what mechanism would he even attempt to create a government that will work?
Let me cut you short.
Be able to break...
Let me cut you short. Based on the evidence of what we have seen so far, President Kyagulanyi would be a worse dictator than President Museveni. Yeah, you can see how he has dealt with dissent in his political party. You see, for all the misgivings that we might have about President Museveni, he's a very tolerant guy. Yeah. He's a very patient guy. He might be intolerant, but he's a very patient guy. When he's going to expunge people of divergent opinion, he doesn't do it in a crude manner. He actually, before he goes for the jugular, he first of all cuts off all their networks. Yeah, he does it in a systematic manner. He's a guy who is quite strategic in the way he goes about his politics. Now, for Kyagulanyi, just look at how he dealt with his former leader of opposition, Mathias Mpuuga. Yeah, that should show you the crudeness with which he would go about running public affairs if he were to be president. So I don't think that. Even Museveni, we cannot say that he had the same level of patience when he was young. I remember when he had just come to power, we had stories of, people who were executed by firing squad in northern Uganda. Yeah. They were killing people during broad daylight, people who had been deemed to have committed crimes akin to treason and all that. But then as time went on, he realized that sometimes it is better to buy off dissent, rather than to use brute force, to deal with dissent. So you could say he has benefited from experience. And then, of course, Robert Kyagulanyi doesn't have that kind of experience. But I think right now, if he were to ascend to power, he would make for a
no, he would. He will very quickly learn a very important lesson. Yeah, so sure. If he became president, and let's assume that his party wasn't able to win a majority in parliament, and so you still end up with an NRM majority parliament with a Kyagulanyi presidency. He will not be able to have any of his agendas legislatively passed. He's going to meet a lot of resistance within the NRM caucus in the party. So hang on one second. Meanwhile, there's going to be all kinds of people from even within his party threatening to engage in subversion, if not either given a job appointment, if not being given a cushy bribe, because we have seen with how many of them have been happy to defect, and even NUP supporters will say, oh, those were just opportunistic. All right, so that means you're admitting among your ranks you have very many opportunistic people. If you ever had a Kyagulanyi presidency, do you think they would stop being opportunistic? They wouldn't. They'll be lining up at his office saying, dude, I campaigned for you, I did this for you, where's my government contract, where's my job appointment, why aren't my people given cabinet positions? And obviously he won't be able to satisfy the needs of all of these people that supported him, and then it will then be very easy for the ruling coalition, or rather the NRM coalition, or whatever remains of the power structure, to subvert the attempts of the NUP to govern. They will probably still be able to convince NUP party officials to vote opposite from what President Kyagulanyi would want. This will probably lead to the inability for him to implement any viable economic agenda, meaning unemployment will probably get worse, meaning the economy will not drastically improve. And now you imagine you're faced with a parliament that you don't control. You can't get your agenda legislatively passed. And God forbid that some actors decide they're going to take this opportunity to foment dissent among the public and pay activist groups to start discontent and promote demonstrations and riots. Now you have young people pouring into the streets saying there's still corruption. We were promised jobs. The jobs are not there. And now you have a President Kyagulanyi who will be faced with a very interesting dilemma. Is he just going to let these people march freely through the streets, or will he have to deploy the police to maintain order? I think you know what will happen. And there will always be people amongst the demonstrators who will resort to more aggressive means in engaging with the police, and some might get killed. And then it's going to be the same story all over again. It's going to be, oh, we now have another dictator on our hands. And if he has any interest in maintaining power, he's either going to have to engage in even more corruption or even more underhanded tactics of perhaps using security apparatus to infiltrate different circles or power circles to see if he may dismantle those. He may resort to arresting some elements he may consider to be subversive. You're essentially going to just have a repeat of the same. So given that he would have to engage in these levels of corruption to really just keep his government functional and running, I feel that people are going to be shocked to see us running into the very same problems they were decrying about the current regime. And crucially, what's going to be missing in that regime that existed in the prior one is a semblance of order. Say what you will about this guy. There's plenty to not like about him. No argument from me there. The one thing, though, you can give some degree of credit to is some order. Now, if some disorder were to break out, say mass protests, either organic or engineered, but most likely engineered, you know how color revolutions work these days, he will be faced with a scenario of having to curtail these demonstrators. And if he does employ force in doing that, then he's very quickly going to disappoint the constituency he won over by claiming to be opposing the same kind of repression that he now is meting out upon them. And I almost want for that to happen. Maybe then people will start to realize that, you know, politics is essentially a game of same script, different cast. Whatever you think you don't like about this system is going to manifest in the future systems. And oftentimes it gets even worse. So I almost want him to win just so that people can see that happen. What do you think about that? Or am I being too pessimistic, and would the country completely turn around if we got a President Kyagulanyi?
No, the rest of the things, apart from where you started from, on having a President Kyagulanyi with a minority in parliament, the rest of the things, I agree with you to a large extent. But the first premise that you made was not very accurate, given the context in which our politics is played. You see, you made an assumption that people are in these political parties because of conviction and they are driven by ideology. Yeah. But people are not in these parties because they are driven by ideology or that they are convicted in making their decisions. No, they use political parties and they were the same way you use public service bans. You do not even need to know the registration number of the matatu that you take to ferry you from one point to another point. I don't know if you get my point. Yeah. So what happens is that upon declaration of President Kyagulanyi, for instance, many of the NRM MPs would be willing to defect to the NUP, yeah, and even be willing to go for a by-election, yeah, I mean, at a given price. Even if they don't cross party lines, they'll be willing to do some horse trading within the legislature, within parliament, and vote with the NUP on critical issues that would propel President Kyagulanyi's agenda in parliament. This is not something that is far-fetched. we saw what happened in Kenya in 2022. I was actually involved in the politics of Kenya in 2022. I was working for the Azimio coalition, the one of the late from Prime Minister Raila Odinga. So what happened is that Azimio got the majority in parliament, both in the National Assembly and in the Senate. But the moment President Ruto was declared, he brought off a number that was just good enough to tilt the scales and allow him to have the leader of majority in both the Senate and the National Assembly. Yeah, because they have a bicameral parliament. Yeah, so it is even much easier here. All that President Kyagulanyi would need to do is to say, look, I am going to be controlling the treasury, so I can actually guarantee that you will have your pockets lined up, and then you will be able if you are able to support my legislative agenda. So that is where I disagreed with the first position that you took. But
okay, that's interesting. So in other words, you're saying that whatever we may think of the existing NRM coalition, even if they were to retain a majority in parliament following the elections, you're saying that they will have no loyalty to the party and will be happy to cooperate with the new power, with the new government, with the new regime, if it means in some way they can also materially benefit in just the same way they have been benefiting previously.
Exactly.
So they have no ideological
there's no ideological grounding. There's no
NRM.
ideological grounding for our political class. They are basically ideological prostitutes, or they are ideological orphans. Yeah? For lack of a better way to describe them.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
They are political job seekers. Yeah? And job seekers rarely have visions. The job seekers go to people's businesses to build, to help other people realize their visions.
All right. So, I mean, what you're painting is a very feasible and probably realistic picture. But then what's that going to do for the idea he has cultivated among many of his supporters that is precisely the thing he will be fighting against? You know, you can't run a campaign saying you're anti-corruption and then transition to having to use corruption to move your agenda forward.
You see, in the election season, in politics, the election season is called the silly period. Yeah, anything goes. There's a lot of posturing, a lot of empty rhetoric flies during election season. Because you see, in election season, people are not having conversations in a structured setting. These conversations are happening on political rallies where one person is standing on the podium or is standing on top of cars and just talking without anybody challenging them. There is no motivation. There is nobody fact-checking what they are saying. They just say anything and get out with it. That's why we call it the silly period in politics. So anything can be said and it will go unchallenged. If the other camp wants to retort, they will, but they also retort without anybody to fact check them or to actually hold them to a higher standard of debate. So I don't want us to hold presidential candidate of the NUP, Robert Kyagulanyi, to a higher standard than we are holding the other presidential candidates, because he's not the only one making this kind of unreasonable statements. Yeah.
It would simply be a case of holding him accountable to his own statements. Because given what you've heard me say about democracy, I'm not even, you're not going to hear me say, no corruption, no corruption, no corruption. I am of the view that if we're going to play this charade called democracy in a pre-industrial, multi-ethnic, ethnically non-homogeneous society, corruption probably is one of the ways, one of the tools you would have to employ to create any semblance of unity, right? You might just want to be smart about it to make sure everyone, all the important people get in a little bit of something to be able to maintain, for the ship to maintain course. But to say that there can never be corruption, I think is a pipe dream in a country like this, which is why I'm saying that has been his central message, though. I don't think you can just walk that back. I mean, I'd be happy to, I wouldn't care if a Kyagulanyi government had to make those sorts of compromise with political opponents to push his agenda. However, it completely undermines the message he was selling, and it's going to cause a lot of his, especially younger supporters, to be grossly disillusioned.
FatBoy, let me help you to situate Robert Kyagulanyi in Uganda's politics, contemporary politics. Yeah? Robert Kyagulanyi is not the most qualified person to be taking on, the position of lead contender on the other side in our politics today. Yeah, he doesn't have the ideological gravitas to be even running for the office of president. What happens is that the reality in politics, you require a strong brand, you require a strategy, and then you require money or resources. You must have the ability to pull resources. Now, the ability to pull resources is usually tied to the brand. So Robert Kyagulanyi found himself in a position where he is because he had a brand that did not actually require a lot of, panel beating to be able to attract resources and to attract people that would provide strategy in one way or the other. So it was circumstantial that he ended up running for president. So I don't want to actually hold him to higher ideals, because I know for a fact that even the people that are supporting him are not supporting him based on the agenda that he's selling. They're not supporting him because of the manifesto that he's articulating. No, they are supporting him because they are of an anti-Museveni, sentiment. They are they're simply saying we've had enough of Museveni, so we want a change. So they call themselves the progressive forces of change, or progressive forces. That's how they fashion their movement. So they are not supporting him because of what he is posturing that he will do. I don't think so. So I want us to situate him that way. Then we'll be able to understand what is taking place. Otherwise, everything else he says, for me, it is noise, because the voters in Uganda do not vote manifestos. They do not vote. They are not ideologically aligned. Yeah, they are simply saying this is a referendum. Should President Museveni continue, or should we have another face in State House? And that is likely what is shaping the politics. If you remember at the start of this conversation, I did mention that what is happening is binarization, and some of us who are being accused of siding with the so-called oppressor is because we have refused to be boxed into the binarization, the framing which is really shaped by binarization. So that is my take. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I like the way you put it, and it's really true, and it's part of the reason why I don't feel emotionally invested in these sorts of contests, is that it's not even about the issues. I've been criticized before for paying a lot of attention to especially American politics. But the reason for that is at least American politics has a semblance of being about certain issues. There's certain very clear ideas that are being discussed, whether it be currently, for example, immigration. That's a big thing there. LGBT rights can be another thing. Freedom of speech,
globalization,
globalism. Yes, those are substantive debates for which intellectual ideas can be contrasted and discussed. But in Africa, it's just, hey, referendum on whether or not we want Museveni. Like, what's there to even discuss? Like, I feel like, especially those who are interested in politics as an intellectual exercise, there's really not much to grapple with, because given what you've explained, you're asking us not to hold a future President Kyagulanyi to high standards, and I agree with you. I'm just saying, then that means that ultimately it has never been about, or ever will be about, policies. It'll just be about who is in office and do we like him or not.
It's about saying, like you said, this is a multi-ethnic society. Yeah. So it's about saying it's our turn to eat. Yeah, let these guys get out.
That is exactly it. You have nailed it. They have eaten. Now let us also.
Eat. Then another group will come and remove this group and also say it's our turn to eat.
And you want me to invest brain cells in passing through?
No, I don't want you to invest. No, I agree with you. I don't want you to invest your brain cells in that. I agree with you. It is also the reason why I cannot take a stand. I cannot. In fact, now let me tell you, the only time I voted for president in Uganda was 2016. And I voted General Biraro, and it was just, out of conviction, and I wanted to make a point to a few people around my circles that actually General Biraro had a manifesto that prioritized the agricultural sector. And for me, I think the agricultural sector is more central to developing Uganda and giving us, a very strong position in the region as opposed to the oil dream. So I voted him on grounds that the Farmers' Party that he was representing had a very good manifesto for the agricultural sector. And that is just how far it went. I did not actually vote hoping that he's going to win, but I just wanted to make a point that I agreed with his vision for Uganda. Yeah. But
so who do you think is going to win the election, or is that obvious?
No, I mean, you're asking if this guy is blue, appearing blue during the day.
So we are to simply go through the motions, accept the passing of supplementary budgets of billions for this election, which is essentially just a
It's a very expensive joke, if you ask me.
It's a very expensive joke.
Yeah, it is a very expensive joke. It's an exercise that only benefits President Museveni because it gives him a semblance of legitimacy on the international scene, but also it helps him to play with the interchangeables class. And service his vehicle. Like I have mentioned that he did mention that whenever we have elections, he is able to remove, to change oil, remove the parts that are worn out and bring in new parts so his vehicle can perform better. I think he is the ultimate beneficiary from this election. And then it also helps to manage the public disquiet that would come from denying people an opportunity to feel that they are determining. Because, every time they go into elections, we have a very high attrition rate for institutions such as parliament. So many guys don't return. So new faces come up and say, now it's my turn to eat. Let me also go and share the spoils. So there are many people who come to the eating table, and that helps to manage public disquiet. Yeah.
And how does any of this help the people of Uganda?
In the bigger scheme of things, it doesn't actually help. We are, the words that I normally use are that both sides of the political divide are complicit in keeping us busy and taking us nowhere. Yeah?
Yeah, you're right. You are so right. Okay. Well, I have one more question for you before I let you go. I mentioned that in America right now, immigration is a big issue. Somalians are catching a lot of flack. President Trump said very unkind things about Somalians. And, apparently there's also issues about the fast-growing Somali community in the U.S., especially in the state of Minnesota. And there have been questions about the ways in which some of them have been conducting themselves. There's been wide allegations of wide-scale fraud, of billions of dollars being siphoned from charity schemes, welfare schemes that are funneled back into Kenya, where they are purchasing a lot of real estate and so forth. And if you check Kenyan Twitter, there's a lot of conversation about, so this is how the Somalians are buying up all of Eastleigh. We've been wondering, we thought they were refugees. How do they have all this money? And the ongoing scandal in America seems to be pointing them to the possibility that this is how it's done. And I wonder if, first, what you think about that, and second, how you think it may tie into what's happening in Uganda, where we are refusing to extend refugee status to people from Somalia, as well as Ethiopia and Eritrea. There have also been bumblings of discontent in certain quarters of people really saying, but you know what? Maybe these guys are too many. I saw you retweet General Sejusa, who put out a lengthy commentary on that. So maybe we'll get to that. But first, your thoughts on the Somalia situation in the U.S. What do you think about that?
No, I agree with the position of President Trump. Yeah, and to me, I think we generally, if the world is going to work for all of us, everybody should stay in their countries and fix the shit in our countries. I don't think that we should be going in other countries, and we will be accused of, exploiting the systems there for the benefit of, our people elsewhere. So I don't agree with people who think that you can leave your countries to be dysfunctional, to be failed states, then go and seek asylum in other countries, and then get money which you can go and invest elsewhere. Here I have, of course, commented about the Eritrean population in Uganda today. I live on the southern side of Kampala, where if you drive from Munyonyo to Zambia around Arena Mall, if you look at the top of all those buildings, they have, writings in Eritrean, alphabet. So the occupation, the Eritrean occupation of southern Kampala is quite huge. And I understand at the moment the numbers have kind of reduced. They're not growing at the rate at which they're growing, simply because I understand they stopped giving refugee status, and that was purely because of a decrease in resources allocated by the UNHCR. So for us, the government here was always happy to grant refugee status, not because the population was so welcoming, but because they benefited from it financially. Now, when the resources dried up and the resources were available in places like Nairobi, the government here said, okay, if there are no resources, then we are also going to stop this. So our government is not actually looking at this from the interest of the Ugandan people. It's looking at it from it's looking at it from a commercial or economic perspective. So they're just trying to see how they can milk the situation.
Okay, so I just want to bring your attention. Let's look at some numbers. So General David Segisa, he tweeted this. He said, Uganda government has been receiving $240 million per year to host refugees, and that many of these refugees were not placed in refugee camps, but are now occupying the local business spaces in the cities, towns, and even villages of Uganda. Our population growth already outpaces our economic growth and the job market expansion, and yet the increase in refugees who are really not in camps but are on the streets as vendors, sex workers, and village hawkers is open and unregulated because perhaps officials share the $240 million they receive to handle the 2 million plus refugees. What do you think about that? Is that an accurate analysis of exactly what's going on?
Yes, it is true that the money is received and it is shared. It's not that it is going towards the subsistence of the refugees or even putting them in camps. I may not personally agree with putting refugees in camps, because even our Ugandans, when they go in the Western world, they are not kept in refugee camps as such. Yeah. They are allowed to integrate in the society, but at least people are entitled to, preferential treatment when it comes to housing and a couple of other social services. You get what I mean? Yeah. So I don't agree with the whole thing of saying they should be in refugee camps and carted away out there. But by and large, I agree with the assertion that the money is actually shared. It is true. I am privy to some insider information, because some of the people who are in charge of that docket are people who have been my clients in one way or another. In a private space, and I'm privy to some of their dealings in public affairs. So I wouldn't be able to drop names, but I know for a fact that money is shared. It is stolen, just like any other resources of government are stolen. So we end up with where we are. These people circumvent the system, and they are able to have also preferential treatment when it comes to taxation and enforcement of municipal laws and other trade ordinances. I'll give you an example. Someone was complaining to me just 2 days back that most of these refugees who are doing business here are not even being squeezed to implement IFRIs like the traders in downtown Kampala. Yeah. Oh, and it is true. Really? I know quite a number. Yeah. They have contacts within the URA that help them to avoid the dragnet of IFRIs getting there. Yeah.
This is crazy. So do you think there's potential for this to lead to further social upheaval and xenophobia? Because right now Somalians in America, you see them really complaining about the stigmatization. How will that also not happen here if things go on at the current rate, where whole suburbs seem to be taken over by many of these refugees. My side of Chiwatule is almost half. It's that Sudanese now, although they're the northern Sudanese, so they look like Ethiopians and Somalians. I worry that if the process isn't managed properly, then they might start to experience similar negative sentiments from the local population, because you already mentioned even from the business sector.
It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So now the only variable that we're looking at here, which is going to tell us when it's going to happen, is time. But I mean, this is something that is always going to happen. It's a question of when. It's a time bomb. The clock is ticking. We just have to watch unless drastic measures are put in place to reverse the trend. But if it stays as it is, it's always going to blow up in our own eyes.